Nelson's Navy, Fact and Fiction. The Royal Navy 1793 to 1815 has inspired a wealth of literature, film, television and radio, both factual and fictional, a whole category known as Nelson's Navy. In the words of Patrick O'Brian, so very often the improbable reality outruns fiction. In 1897, the American historian Alfred Thayer Mahn concluded his series on the influence of sea power with 2 volumes entitled Life of Nelson, the embodiment of the sea power of Great Britain. This sums up why the Royal Navy of this period is known as Nelson's Navy. Nelson's Navy, Fact and Fiction, is for my fellow fans, so I will try to avoid spoilers. Part 1 is about the fascinating story of the books themselves, both factual and fictional. Part 2 will cover the period of the French Revolutionary War, 1793 to 1802, in both fact and fiction. Part 3 will continue with the war against Napoleon, 1803 to 1805, including Trafalgar. Part 4, 1806 to 1815. Then we will look at the ships, including those used in film and TV adaptations. The Napoleonic Wars began as a war against revolutionary France, in which Nelson himself was recalled after several years on half pay. He was given command of HMS Agamemnon 64, at the same time as one of his fictional contemporaries, Richard Bolitho, gets Hyperion 74. Both had joined the Navy as boys. By contrast, the real Thomas Cochrane and the fictional Horatio Hornblower joined age 17 in 1793. On the factual side, Falconer's Universal Dictionary of the Marine was first published in 1769. By the time it was consulted by the ladies of Mapes, it was coming up to its 4th revised edition. It was well illustrated by engravings of details such as decks, frames, and rigging. Much of the author's knowledge comes from period sources, including Falconer, and others such as Henrik Chapman's Architectura Navalis Mercatoria of 1768. Chapman was an English naval architect who worked in Sweden, hence the Latin title. In Mr. Midshipman Hornblower, the examination for lieutenant, he and his fellow candidates consult Norrie's Epitome of Navigation and also Clark's Seamanship. These were real publications, but they came out a few years later, as did Darcy Lever's Young Sea Officer's Sheet Anchor. This was a handy primer which remained in publication on both sides of the Atlantic until the steam age began in the middle of the century. Serres Liber Nauticus was first published in 1805. It was the most lavish volume to date, with coloured plates. Nautical fiction took an early lead in tales of adventure and the novel itself, with Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe in 1719. The Adventures of Roderick Random by Tobias Smollett followed in 1748. These were based on his own experience in the Royal Navy as a surgeon's mate. At least 2 early 19th century authors actually served in Nelson's Navy, Frederick Marryat and Frederick Chamier. Another former sea officer became a highly successful and accomplished marine artist. Nicholas Pocock was a former merchant ship captain whose logs were illustrated with his own sketches. He was even commissioned by retired admirals such as Lord Hood. In Desolation Island, Captain Aubrey has a Pocock in Ashgrove Cottage. Pocock was actually present at the glorious 1st of June battle. The best-known early novel of Nelson's Navy is Frederick Marryat's Mr. Midshipman Easy. Marryat served from 1806 through the War of 1812 and afterwards. After resigning his commission as a post captain in 1830, he wrote 24 novels, including The Children of the New Forest. Mr. Midshipman Easy is a kind of nautical Pickwick Papers. It even has elements of Gothic romance, including Sicilian banditti. In book form it was published before Charles Dickens' Pickwick Papers. An early review compared Patrick O'Brien's Aubrey Maturin series to Marryat. Novels of Nelson's Navy take their place in 19th century historical fiction. This ranges from Walter Scott's Ivanhoe to Robert Louis Stevenson. It includes The Three Musketeers, Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities, and the French classic Les Miserables, which appeared in 1862, as did the first series to feature Nelson's Navy. This began with The Three Midshipmen by W.H.G. Kingston. R.M. Ballantyne's 1869 novel The Battle and the Breeze featured the Battle of the Nile. Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island was followed by several historical novels, of which Kidnapped is the most famous. Factual accounts were provided by naval historians such as William James in 1827 and William Laird Clowes in 1900. In 1905, Victorian children's novelist G.A. Henty added By Conduct and Courage, a story of Nelson's days. C.S. Forester's first Hornblower novel came 100 years after Marryat's Mr. Midshipman Easy. This influential series was more of a revival than something new in historical fiction. Forester was already an established novelist, perhaps best known for The African Queen. In The Hornblower Companion, Forester explained that his inspiration for Hornblower was the man alone. He realized that a Royal Navy captain was just such an isolated individual, especially on an independent mission far from higher command, as in the first of the series, The Happy Return, also known as Beat to Quarters. He continued the series up to Lord Hornblower, then went back to the beginning of Hornblower's career with Mr. Midshipman Hornblower. The Second World War interrupted the Hornblower series. Despite the war, R.W. Daly had two tales of Nelson's Navy published. Broadsides, a novel of the Napoleonic era in 1940, and Soldier of the Sea in 1942. In 1945, Forester continued the Hornblower series until his death in 1966. The series was highly successful, including Winston Churchill among its admirers. According to the historical novelist Alan Mallinson, publishers were on the lookout for his successor. Master and Commander, the first of Patrick O'Brien's Aubrey Maturin series, was published in 1970. As previously noted, an early review compared the novels to Marryat rather than Hornblower. The series was also written in chronological order. Northcote, Parkinson, Woodman and others followed and continue to do so. Nelson's Navy has even entered the realms of fantasy with Naomi Novik's Temeraire series. The next part will include more on the models for our heroes, including Nelson himself. Other parts will include descriptions of ships of the period, both warships and merchantmen, for anyone curious as to what kind of vessels polacas and settees were, and also the vessels used in TV and film adaptations. Thank you for watching.